Caps are going to win, MP 6-2. I'm not supposed to take sides, right? We're a show for the whole country. Sorry, Caps are going to win. And Steph Curry, come on, Golden State Warriors, unbelievable game last night. What are we, sports? No, we're not. We're politics and the culture. But sports is important. It's part of the culture. Shannon Bream is a huge sports fan. She has a great show on tap. Right, Shannon? Well, you're a Caps fan. Hello?
I'm all about the college football, though, and I'm counting down the days, Laura, until it starts.
All right. Have a great show.
Thank you, Laura. All right, this is a Fox News alert. Breaking news tonight on the Inspector General probe into the Clinton email controversy. Plus, Rudy Giuliani speaking out again on the president's pardon power. And Senator Lindsey Graham reveals the latest on his inquiry into whether Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein should recuse himself from the special counsel probe. We've got news on that. Plus, some are calling it a huge Supreme Court win for religious freedom, but others point out the cake's not totally baked yet. Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council tells us where the fight goes from here on religious freedom. After the justices side with the baker who refused to create a custom wedding cake for a gay couple. And Bill Clinton's book tour is off to a rocky start as the former president gets visibly flustered and defensive after being asked questions about the Me Too movement and Monica Lewinsky. We've got all the details. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. The president's top outside counsel, Rudy Giuliani, standing by his comments on the president's ability to pardon himself if he so desires, and also shedding new light on the memo about the Donald Trump Jr. meeting in Trump Tower with a Russian attorney. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is all over the details. He's breaking it down for us tonight. Hey,
well, Shannon, great to see you. Right, the President Trump's lead attorney tonight trying to shut the door, though, on the idea he may try to pardon himself, even though he does have that power, he says, as George Papadopoulos' wife is exclusively telling Fox tonight just the opposite. She says it's time her husband gets some help from the president. Now, the president is raising the stakes in this whole investigation by declaring the special counsel probe is unconstitutional and that he has the power to pardon himself if he wants, suggesting there may be major clashes ahead, not just with Robert Mueller, but the Congress and the Supreme Court as well. The president made clear he does not expect to pardon himself because he doesn't believe he did anything wrong. Key Trump advisors tell me an important part of all this is what Giuliani was doing when he discussed this on the Sunday TV talk show circuit with the president's blessing. He's signaling to Mueller there's still a chance of a one-on-one interview, but only if the questions are severely limited, and a warning shot, too, to Mueller that if the special counsel wants to instead issue a subpoena to compel the testimony of the president, get ready for a battle in court. And I can tell you the president tonight offered a combative tone. So he did a phone call with the Minnesota Republican Party tonight, celebrating what he called the accomplishments of his first 500 days in office. He said the Russia probe is a witch hunt and that Mueller's investigation is not even constitutional. Giuliani tonight said again the president is not going to pardon himself, but Papadopoulos' wife told our own Tucker Carlson her husband should be pardoned. Watch.
I know how much dedicated and committed he was in the Trump campaign. I know he did an excellent job. I know he's because of this incident, his freedom is challenged. So I trust and hope and I ask to President Trump to pardon him. I hope he will.
Okay.
The pardon power is complete, and there is no limitation on it. Would somebody impose a practical limitation on it? Absolutely. The practical limitation is it would be suicide to pardon yourself.
That's the political limitation. That's the political limitation.
You'll never reach it.
The practical one is you don't pardon in the case of an impeachment, and that's what he would be doing.
It's not going to happen.
Good.
And pardon doesn't get you off impeachment.
This battle comes in the context of an extraordinary 20-page memo sent to the special counsel back in January by two of the president's personal attorneys at the time, John Dowd, who's now out, Jay Sekulow, who's still in, asserting the president cannot really obstruct justice because he has the power to shut down any of these investigations whenever he wants. The memo also states the president himself dictated what turned out to be a misleading statement about his son Donald Trump Jr.'s 2016 meeting at Trump Tower with Russians. That conflicts with what Sarah Sanders said at the White House podium and what Sekulow himself said last year on some Sunday talk shows, that he minimized the president's role in drafting the statement. Giuliani is dismissing that tonight as a small miscue by Sekulow, but Democrats pushing hard on that tonight.
Yeah, they're definitely digging in on that part of the story. All right, Ed, thank you very much. All right, new tonight, the special counsel accusing former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort of attempting to tamper with witnesses. Manafort is pleading not guilty to a slew of federal crimes stemming from his past lobbying work for Ukrainian politicians. Meanwhile, the White House says the president does not have to pardon himself because he's done nothing wrong. Let's bring in Nelson Cunningham, former White House General Counsel under President Clinton, and Ken Klukowski, Senior Counsel for First Liberty Institute. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about this pardon power idea. Jonathan Turley, a professor who's very familiar to our Fox audience, he's on quite a bit, says this: the language of Article 2 is quite explicit in giving the president a pardon power over federal offenses, with the only exception related to impeachments. Donald Trump can certainly make a good faith textual case for the right to self-pardon. Nelson, that doesn't mean it's a great idea politically or the optics of it, but at least Professor Turley thinks there's an argument on the text that it would be legal.
I think it could be legal. This is one of those constitutional rabbit holes that we could spend months and months pursuing, even years. And I frankly don't believe that Special Counsel Mueller will decide to go down that constitutional rabbit hole. The only reason we have to worry about the president pardoning himself in a criminal sense is if Robert Mueller tries to indict him. There are not many legal scholars who think that an indictment of the president is likely. However, if Mr. Mueller recommends impeachment, the Constitution is absolutely clear. The president's power to pardon, it says, quote, except in cases of impeachment. So if Trump can pardon himself in a criminal case, but I don't think that's going to be relevant here because Mueller's not likely to indict him criminally.
Yeah.
In impeachment, he can't.
Yeah, and impeachment is a totally different valve in the Constitution provided for lawmakers. If they're unhappy about something this president does and feel it rises to the level, they do have another option for addressing that. Now, Richard Primus, another legal scholar and professor, says this: I think it's pretty clear that there's a right answer, and that answer is self-pardon should not be regarded as valid. A power to self-pardon would violate the basic rule of law principle that no person should be allowed to adjudicate his own case. What do you say, Ken?
Well, Shannon, I agree that it's a rabbit hole. The reality is there are two limits on the pardon power. One is legal, and that is that the Constitution says you can't do it for impeachment. The other is political. And Rudy is absolutely right. The president would never pardon himself. But the joke here and the underlying point here is the president doesn't need to pardon himself because the president hasn't done anything wrong. If Mueller wants to probe questions or conversations between president and the attorney general, that's categorically covered by executive privilege. Beyond that, the president is the unitary executive. He can talk with any of his subordinates about how they exercise his power, the president's power, anytime he wants, and there's nothing criminal about that. And third, as the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel, the elite legal team for the U.S. government in the Justice Department, as they have held both under Republican presidents, that's Richard Nixon, and Democratic presidents, Bill Clinton, the uniform consensus is that a sitting president cannot be indicted for obstruction of justice or any other federal crime. So this just isn't going to happen, and nor should it happen, because the president has not done anything illegal.
Right,
and there's
that's
no
what
evidence to say
he and his
that
legal
has.
team both are adamant on that point. So let me ask you both very quickly. There are a number of legal scholars out there who say there's no way the framers could have intended that someone could become the most powerful man in America, then be able to commit crimes and excuse himself. They're not talking obviously about the specific case, but they're saying that idea that he could makes no sense. Get you both quickly to weigh in. Nelson, I'll start with you.
I think that would be an extraordinary situation. We have not had to face that in our country yet. Whether a president could be indicted after his presidency for things that occurred during his presidency, the Supreme Court has not ruled that out. That could be possible.
All right, Ken, quickly to you.
Well, I agree that post-office prosecutions are possible, but yeah, I mean, it comes back to a political reality. It's like the Constitution says that you can't cut judges' pay. What if Congress were to refuse to pay any salaries for federal judges? What would we do? It's one of those constitutional imponderables that we never have to face because the political reality would never let it happen.
But
so it's not going to happen with this president.
Somehow they end up on our law school exams, those questions. That may never happen.
It's how law school professors, it's how they feel good about themselves.
Insane.
That's
All right,
right.
Nelson and Ken, thank you both very much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Shannon.
Thank you.
All right, and
bless.
calling for a tough deal Are Democrats now suggesting the North Korea talks are far more perilous than the negotiations President Obama had with Iran? Well, Kristen Fisher is here tonight with the very latest on that and on Kim Jong-un's surprise shakeup of his top generals just days before the summit is scheduled. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, good evening, Shannon. There's really two ways to look at Kim Jong-un firing his top 3 military officials just days before the summit. On one hand, this could be good for the U.S. because he replaced them with people who are loyal to him, people who might be open to accept the massive changes that would have to come if he strikes a deal with President Trump. But the other way to look at it is that this may be a sign of just how much the North Korean military opposes a deal with the U.S., and that could limit how far Kim Jong-un is willing to go in terms of giving up his nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un is cleaning house, according to South Korea's news agency, elevating 3 of his most loyal officers ahead of next week's summit. The White House says President Trump is preparing by receiving daily briefings from his national security team while negotiations continue in the DMZ and Singapore.
The advanced team in Singapore is finalizing logistical preparations and will remain in place until the summit begins. I can also tell you the schedule for tentatively for that first meeting will be on June 12th at 9 a.m. Singapore time and take place June 11th, 9 p.m. East Coast time.
It's been 3 days since Kim Jong-un's number 2 hand-delivered a letter from his boss to President Trump, but the contents of that letter are still a mystery.
I'm not going to get into the specifics of the letter, but as the president said, they were interesting, and we feel like things are continuing to move forward.
But before the president takes off for Singapore, today the Senate's top Democrats sent him a letter. They want the White House to clue Congress in on its plans before the negotiations begin. They also want to make clear that any deal that does not require the complete denuclearization of North Korea is a bad deal.
The president needs to be willing to take time to construct a good deal. And if he finds that one is not achievable, the president must be willing to walk away from the table.
In the letter, Senate Democrats say in order to earn their support, North Korea must agree to dismantle and remove all of their nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. It must end the production and enrichment of uranium and plutonium for military purposes, suspend all of their ballistic missile tests and eliminate their ballistic missile program. It must commit to anywhere, anytime compliance inspections. And finally, the deal must be permanent.
If the deal doesn't live up to these standards, then the president should not expect Democratic support in the Senate if he tries to lift sanctions to implement an agreement.
Now, remember when President Trump fired Rex Tillerson and H.R. McMaster in March? Back then, so many people couldn't believe that he would do that with these North Korean negotiations on the line. Now Kim Jong-un has fired his top 3 military officers with just days to go. So if one thing is certain, Shannon, it's that nothing is certain with leaders this unpredictable. Shannon.
Right you are. Kristen Fisher, thank you very much. From North Korea to Russia, our next guest is in the center of it all. Most recently pressing Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein on whether he should recuse himself from the special counsel probe. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham sits on the Senator Armed Services and Judiciary Committees. Welcome. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's talk about this letter that you sent on May 31st to the Deputy Attorney General. You say these 3 questions you have for him. Do you consider yourself a potential witness in the Mueller investigation regarding the firing of Director Comey by President Trump? If not, why not? If so, should you recuse yourself from further interactions with and oversight of the Mueller investigation? Have you heard back from him?
No, I haven't. And why did I write the letter? The New York Times reported that Mr. McCabe, the former number 2 at the FBI, that he turned over a memo he wrote about the dismissal of Mr. Comey regarding Rosenstein's involvement. So what does that tell us? That tells us that if you're going to do an obstruction of justice investigation of the president regarding Comey's firing, then you're going to have to talk to Rosenstein because it was his memo the president used to justify the firing. In other words, you can't oversee an investigation where you're going to be a witness in that investigation.
What would be your end goal then? Do you think he shouldn't be part of this investigation? And if not, what happens to him?
To get him to explain to me why he should be allowed to continue. I got a simple goal. Play it by the book. Let Mueller do his thing. Stay within the confines of his charter. When it comes to looking at Clinton email investigation and the FBI FISA warrant scandal, I don't think Rosenstein can make a good decision there because he signed the warrant application to get the FISA warrant based on the dossier prepared by a foreign agent paid for by the Democratic Party. Rosenstein's a fine man, but I'm trying to be the rule of law guy here. If you believe that Mueller should be allowed to do his investigation without interference, which I do, then how can you leave Rosenstein in charge of that investigation if he's in fact a witness? Why isn't Sessions running this investigation? Because he was part of the campaign. I don't think anybody in America hardly would accept Sessions overseeing an investigation of the campaign he was involved in. Here's the question for Rosenstein. How can you oversee an investigation where you're a key witness?
Okay, you don't give him a deadline, but what is your expectation for following up or getting some kind of answer from him?
Sooner rather than later. Based on the news reporting and based on what I know about the case, I can't believe he won't be a witness in any obstruction of justice investigation regarding firing Comey. The question is a simple one. If you're going to be a witness or potentially going to be a witness, how can you manage that investigation? I don't think you can. I'm not challenging his character. I'm not challenging his his good intentions. I'm challenging whether or not he legally can go forward and oversee the Mueller investigation.
You say the Mueller investigation can continue, and you said in the past if the president fired him or got rid of him, it would be the beginning of the end. It would be World War III. So you're not saying that the investigation needs to stop. You're saying maybe Rosenstein is not in this proper role. All right, let us know what you hear from him.
Well, I think it's important that he clears this up for the country because he legally cannot oversee an investigation where he's a key witness.
Okay, so let me ask you, there's a lot of speculation about the Inspector General report coming out within days, potentially. Do you think it's going to answer questions, give people clarity on certain issues and different key players, or do you think it's going to provoke a whole nother round of speculation?
I don't think the Inspector General's report is an adequate substitute for a special counsel to look at whether or not the Department of Justice improperly obtained a FISA warrant by using a paid informant by the Democratic Party, a foreign agent, to go to Russia and collect information against candidate Trump. I don't believe the FBI Inspector General can tell us all we need to know about the FBI agents in charge of the Clinton email investigation because he doesn't have access to all the witnesses. I'm sure he'll do a good job, but how does Rosenstein make a good decision about whether or not there should be a special counsel looking at DOJ corruption and FBI misdeeds if in fact he was one of the people asking for the FISA warrant? I don't know how in the world he has an objective view of this because he was one of the people asking the court to issue the warrant.
Who do you think should be worried about this upcoming IG report?
I think the top level of the FBI, I think McCabe needs to be worried. I think Comey needs to be worried. I think these two FBI agents who were in the tank for Clinton and hated Trump needs to be worried. And at the end of the day, what we have found is that the two FBI agents involved in looking at the Clinton email investigation had a thumb on the scale for Clinton against Trump. We also see a warrant being issued by a federal court based on a dossier prepared by a foreign agent paid for by the Democratic Party used to obtain a warrant against Carter Page, who was part of the Trump campaign, and Rosenstein was in that chain of events. Let Mueller do his job, but for God's sakes, is not one Democrat in the country worried about the FISA abuse here? Is not one Democrat worried about the fact that two FBI agents in charge of an investigation clearly were in the tank for the person they were investigating?
Well, we'll get a look at that report soon, and we'll see who does potentially have something to worry about more concretely in the form of an indictment or something else. In the meantime, Senator, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. The Supreme Court rules in favor of a baker who declined to create a custom wedding cake for a same-sex couple. Some say it's a big deal. Others argue the dispute is actually far from settled. The ruling leaves some questions. We'll try to answer them. Joining us live, Tyler Deaton of the American Unity Fund and Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. Stay with us. In one of the remaining blockbuster cases facing the Supreme Court this term, the justices handed a Christian baker a win by a 7-2 margin after he declined to make a custom cake for a gay couple and their wedding. But today's decision also left some unanswered questions.
Justice Kennedy has held that tolerance is a two-way street, and Jack Phillips was not tolerated by the Civil Rights Commission of Colorado.
We got your back, Jack!
The legal team for Colorado baker Jack Phillips is celebrating today after a 7-2 Supreme Court opinion holding that Phillips never got a fair shake when he was sued by a gay couple after declining to create a custom cake in celebration of their same-sex wedding. Writing for the majority, Justice Kennedy noted that at least one of the Colorado commissioners who heard the original complaint likened Phillips' explanation and religious beliefs to those who supported slavery and the Holocaust. Quote, "This sentiment is inappropriate for a commission charged with the solemn responsibility of fair and neutral enforcement of Colorado's anti-discrimination law." Kennedy pointed out that a number of the commissioner's statements implied, quote, that religious beliefs and persons are less than fully welcome in Colorado's business community. But Kennedy himself noted that the broader legal issues in this dispute are far from settled and must be done so with tolerance for both sides, leaving LGBT advocates with mixed feelings.
We're certainly disappointed that the Supreme Court found in this narrow set of circumstances in favor of the baker. But what's important here is the Supreme Court in no way undermined our nation's civil rights laws.
The couple at the center of the case, Charlie Craig and Dave Mullins, say, quote, "Today's decision means our fight against discrimination and unfair treatment will continue. We will continue fighting until no one does." In Justice Ginsburg's dissent, joined by Justice Sotomayor, she found it irrelevant that Phillips sold cakes and cookies to gay and lesbian customers, despite the fact that he would not create custom wedding cakes for them, adding, quote, "I see no reason why the comments of one or two commissioners should be taken to overcome Phillips' refusal to sell a wedding cake to Craig and Mullins." So, two big decisions at the Supreme Court today dealing with two hot-button issues, religious freedom and abortions for underage teens who are in the U.S. illegally. So let's talk about the political impact with Tyler Deaton, Senior Advisor of the American Unity Fund, and Tony Perkins, President of the Family Research Council. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, so obviously Justice Kennedy pointed back to those comments by a commissioner at the lowest level who was the first to look at this case, likening the baker's religious convictions to people who supported slavery or to Nazis. Tyler, that was enough for him to say, we're not really going to get to the meaty merits of this case, but on that basis alone, he should never have been subjected to that kind of discrimination against his religious beliefs.
Yeah, and that attitude is completely out of bounds, and since then that commissioner is no longer even on the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. And I think what it points to is those were hurtful statements to make about people of faith. I think that there are a lot of LGBT Americans who are also hearing sometimes hurtful things said about them. And I think that all of this is pointing to the need for us to come together, come and find some sort of a middle ground where people of faith and LGBT people can both be respected by the laws and can now just be out in the free marketplace doing their business and know that they're free to pursue their American dream regardless of their values or regardless of who they're married to.
Yeah, and today Justice Kennedy, he acknowledged basically that the courts still have to decide the meat of this case, and he said there has to be tolerance on both sides for people with genuine religious beliefs and, as you said, for people who are gay and lesbian who want to be in commerce and in business. So he said it's going to be a delicate question to answer. Now, we know that on Thursday in their private conference, the justices are going to consider the case of a Washington florist who basically has been put in ruin by what she's faced. A longtime customer of hers came to her and said, "I want you to do the flowers for my same-sex wedding." She politely declined, referred him to another florist, three others actually. But Tony, the fact that they're even going to consider that case certainly says they know the core issue has not yet been decided.
Oh, without question, without question. And nobody should be surprised by this, Shannon, because 3 years ago in the Obergefell case, the four justices warned of this. Right. Alito in particular said that this is going to lead to the vilification of those who refuse to assent to the new orthodoxy. And so we're seeing this. That's exactly what the Colorado so-called Civil Rights Commission did. And, of course, that was during the Obama era when it was open season on Christians. It'd be great if people would get along, but that's not going to happen because of a court decision. It's going to happen because people decide that, hey, people have different views on this. But what we're seeing with these wedding vendors like Jack Phillips is that these activists, LGBT activists, are targeting them to make examples out of them. As long as that's occurring, these things are going to be challenged. You're going to see people of faith pushing back, and it's going to be in the courts. And you're absolutely right. Under the Roberts Court, they've had very narrow decisions with limited application of their decisions, so this is not surprising. But this thing is going to be back before the courts, and you're right, it could be decided that Thursday. They're going to be looking at the Flores case.
Yeah, and something tells me if they vote yes on that Justice Kennedy isn't going anywhere. I think he'd like to stick around and be a part of the consideration of that case if they move forward on that one. I want to ask you all, too, about something that's kind of flown under the radar. We've been following the case of underage illegal women who come across the border that are here in the States and then seeking an abortion. And the ACLU and other groups have rallied to them to say it shouldn't matter where they are, they should get help with these abortions, whether they're here illegally or not. Today, the Supreme Court vacated a lower court ruling that essentially had said, yes, the administration has to help them with that, or when they're in federal custody, that has to be allowed. But it's moot because the young woman who was at the center of that case did get an abortion. Now, the ACLU says that they're not going to stop fighting on this. So the two sides have weighed in. The Department of Justice said this: we're pleased with the Supreme Court's decision to set aside a lower court decision that allowed for an unaccompanied minor to receive an abortion while in federal custody. The Supreme Court has repeatedly made clear that the federal government is not required to facilitate abortions for minors. NARAL, obviously a pro-choice group, says this: every woman deserves the right to make decisions about her life, body, and future, regardless of her immigration status. Want to get reaction from both of you. Tyler, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and you know, Shannon, this is a really interesting thing to talk about. I think that my organization, because we're a conservative group that does advocate for LGBT issues, I think that a lot of people end up wondering if we're working on other social issues and how we feel about these other things. And I have to tell you, this is just not something that I'm an expert on. But I do think that here it's important to take a full and consistent pro-life position. It wasn't until the last year that our government began to detain pregnant, undocumented women. And I think that at the core of this, it's that we're detaining pregnant, undocumented women, and we should reverse that policy. I think that the most pro-life thing that we could do right now, and this has been advocated by the Catholic bishops and the Southern Baptist Convention, is that we should not be detaining pregnant women, and we wouldn't have this problem to begin with.
Yeah, and I think, Tony, part of the problem that stems from these cases is the fact that these are minors, and in many cases that leaves,
these are minors.
That leaves officials with no other choice. Your reaction?
Right. Well, first off, I commend the Department of Justice because we've been working with them on this. They were working very diligently to find sponsors for some of these unaccompanied minors. This is still an issue. It's ongoing, and other courts, I think there's concern that they'll be forced to facilitate these abortions in other cases. So I think this court decision is a very good one, and I look for the Justice Department to make the most of this, because this is an administration that is very committed to upholding the sanctity of human life, all human life, regardless of what side of the border or the tracks it's conceived on. So I think this is a good decision, and I look forward to the Department of Justice making the most of it.
Tony and Tyler, we thank you both for a very respectful, thorough conversation on these two hot cases. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Shannon.
All right. On the eve of the California primary, Golden State residents are worried about just about more than who's going to be their next governor. Californians also facing tough new, get this, water restrictions. Are they going to have to choose between showering and doing their laundry? Well, Trace will fact check that for us. And Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley tries to prove how bad it is for children detained by ICE. What exactly did he find out? The White House calling it a publicity stunt, and he's firing back. We will let you decide. Next. New tonight, the president announcing the Philadelphia Eagles will not be visiting the White House tomorrow to celebrate their Super Bowl victory due to the national anthem controversy. The Eagles, who won Super Bowl 52, apparently wanted to send a smaller group of players. A handful did not plan to attend, but it appears the president said no thanks. Now, the president says he's still going to host a different event for 1,000 fans, quote, one that will honor our great country, pay tribute to the heroes who fight to protect it, and loudly and proudly play the national anthem. Well, it is the biggest midterm primary day so far this cycle. Tomorrow, voters in 8 states head to the polls: California, Mississippi, Alabama, Iowa, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, and South Dakota. The races include 4 Senate seats, 4 gubernatorial races, and 9 of the most competitive House districts in the country. Now, a lot of the attention is focused on California's jungle primary, the crowded field of Democrats trying to flip some GOP seats, but always in the backdrop, California's far-left policies. And Trace Gallagher is here with some doozies tonight. We weren't even sure these were real, so we'll leave it up to you to tell us, Trace.
Yeah, the crazy new rule, Shannon. For 41 years, unions have been allowed to collect dues from public employees without their permission, even if they're not union members. It's called fair share fees, and it's to make sure that employees who benefit from union representation don't get a free ride. But a few years back, an Illinois state employee didn't want to pay dues because he didn't agree with the union's political activities, so he sued, claiming his First Amendment rights were being violated. The Supreme Court is now set to rule on that case, and California public unions are betting the court will come down against fair share fees, which could be a serious financial blow. So the unions are backing a series of bills in California to help them hold on to their members, including bills that would give unions time to contact workers and try to change the minds of those who no longer want to pay union dues. You know, a little bit of convincing. And other bills that would prohibit government agencies from publicly disclosing information about new employee orientation, which critics say is simply a way to prevent anti-union activists from contacting new employees before they sign up to pay their union dues. Now, separately, to help fight future droughts in California, it now has some new laws limiting how much water you can use. It'll start with an indoor maximum of 55 gallons per day per person. In 2025, that goes down to 52.5 gallons and 50 gallons by 2030. And here's what one mom has to say. Watch.
I get it. I understand that we're trying to preserve, but 55 gallons a day with a child and just every day having to wash clothes, that's just, in my opinion, not feasible.
No, and it gets better. Before he leaves office, California Governor Jerry Brown wants a sizable tax on drinking water, the first in state history. Brown says it'll be used to clean up water systems. It would run each person about $12 a year and businesses a lot more than that. Of course, California already has the highest state tax, sales tax, gas tax. Maybe that's why 58% of voters are against taxing drinking water. And finally, some San Diego parents have been holding their sixth graders out of school because they're not happy with the sex ed curriculum, which covers gender identity, gender roles, STDs, stages of sex response, and a male reproductive crossword puzzle. The school district says, quote, it is absolutely appropriate for our students, but parents are welcome to have their kids opt out if they choose. Shannon.
I mean, I like a good crossword puzzle. Could be a good learning tool. Okay. Trace, thank you very much.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Well, the Trump administration has warned that illegal migrant children will be separated from those if they're suspected of smuggling them across the border. Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat from Oregon, decided to go to a detention center holding illegal minors in Texas to prove, he says, they're being treated inhumanely. Now, he was reportedly given permission to visit 2 specific facilities. We believe he went to at least one of those, and then he showed up at a third with cameras rolling.
The first room had a series of cages that look a lot like dog kennels in which people had recently arrived and been put into them. They were very crowded.
Well, tonight the White House says Senator Merkley was, quote, irresponsibly spreading blatant lies about routine immigration enforcement. Well, Bill Clinton on a book tour, but his novel about a progressive Southerner getting impeached by a conservative House is not what's grabbing headlines. The former president battles the media over questions about the Lewinsky scandal, now in light of the Me Too movement.
I dealt with it 20 years ago plus, and the American people, 2/3 of them stayed with me.
Former President Bill Clinton thinks the Me Too movement is long overdue and is even claiming credit for empowering women in his orbit. But he became noticeably defensive when asked if he should have resigned over how he handled his affair with then 22-year-old intern Monica Lewinsky.
I dealt with it 20 years ago plus, and the American people, 2/3 of them stayed with me. And I've tried to do a good job since then with my life and with my work. That's all I have to say to you.
Jamu Green is a Fox News contributor and distinguished fellow at Barnard College's Athena Center for Leadership, along with Derek Hunter, contributing editor at the Daily Caller and author of this book, Outrage, Inc. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
All right, I want to play a little bit more of what President Clinton had to say during his interview with NBC News.
I felt terrible then. And I came to grips with it.
Did you ever apologize to him?
No, yes, and nobody believes that I got out of that for free. I left the White House $16 million in debt.
Jamil, you know Monica Lewinsky has spoken out on this as well, and she said, listen, basically my whole life's been destroyed by how this turned out. It looks like President Clinton has rebounded pretty well.
Well, I mean, definitely. I think that he was very flustered and floundering and even surprised at these questions today, Shannon, which that was surprising to me. But what was even more surprising was just his lack of empathy. This coming from someone whose ability to connect with people and be empathetic was the stuff of legends, political legend. I think there is no doubt he should make an attempt, if she would allow it, to privately apologize to Monica Lewinsky. He had an opportunity, I think, this morning or in this interview to live up to what this Me Too movement is about, to have some reflection and some regret. And he did not live up to that moment. That was surprising.
I want to play a little bit of what Joe Lockhart, obviously former White House press secretary, said about his impression of this interview.
I think in that moment you're seeing Donald Trump a little bit, and I'm not comparing them on any other level beyond the terrible strategy it is to make himself, you, the issue here, and to be victimized. He was not the victim then. Donald Trump is not the victim now.
Derek?
It's very interesting to hear the people I remember telling me that this was no big deal after 8 months of telling me it didn't happen, now come out and change their tune. It's a testament to the fact that the Clintons have lost their political cachet. Aside from private fundraisers, nobody wants to hit the campaign trail with them. The idea of Bill Clinton apologizing, though, 20 years later is now just a sign of the times. It's clear he wouldn't mean it. He said in that clip you played that he did apologize, and then when pressed whether or not he apologized to Monica Lewinsky, he said he didn't, but he then made it about himself that he left the White House $16 million in debt. He left the White House $16 million in debt because he lied about his affair during a sexual harassment case and tried to obstruct justice. So it's a self-inflicted wound. By the way, he's worth now several $100 million, so it worked out in the end for him. Meanwhile, Monica Lewinsky is an anti-bullying activist, which I'm sure 20 years ago wasn't her dream job. So in a way, he didn't just victimize Monica Lewinsky with the power difference between a president and an intern. He's changed the trajectory of her life significantly.
He did say this. He says, I like the Me Too movement. It's way overdue. Jimmy, was there a missed opportunity or one he can still claim here to try to be a voice for what happened back then, what's happening now? I mean, he says he likes the movement and he thinks it's overdue.
Absolutely. I think he can use his great communication skills that we've come to know to try to turn this around in a positive way for all people involved. Rebecca Traister has this amazing piece out in The Cut today, Shannon, that really talks about how it was the Lewinsky scandal with President Clinton that really slowed down the national conversation around sexual harassment. And that's a reckoning.
But that just I think presupposes that it was just Monica Lewinsky. If Bill Clinton wants to come out and embrace the Me Too movement, he's got a closet full of skeletons he has to address first. It's not just Monica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky and Jennifer Flowers are the ones that he's admitted to publicly and were willing participants. The others, Kathleen Willey, Juanita Broderick, Paula Jones, they weren't willing participants.
And two of those women were on Laura Ingraham tonight, and they obviously were very upset about the way that he portrayed the conversation about Me Too and about his guilt or innocence in the whole matter. And Jammu, I mean, those are obviously big cases that didn't get a lot of attention at the time, but even in retrospect, a number of the people involved with interviewing those women or trying to stifle them from interviews have now said, we may have gotten that wrong.
And I think that is one of the great things that we are seeing come out of the Me Too moment. I think it's also important, Shannon, to recognize that while the scandal almost ended President Clinton's presidency, in this age of this reckoning where President Clinton needs to face it, and it's not a partisan issue, many men, many people who were complicit in this need to face it, in the midst of this, there has been little to no accountability or consequences for our current president, Donald Trump.
But it's not about Donald Trump.
Quick word, Derek, and then we got to
For
wrap
8
up.
years, every time anybody criticized Barack Obama, it was immediately George W. Bush came screaming out of your mouth. Now, if you criticize Bill Clinton, it's Donald Trump. This is about Bill Clinton. You can deal with Donald Trump all you want separately, but Bill Clinton has gotten away with this for 20 years, and now to see Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of Virginia, and Kirsten Gillibrand, senator of New York, say that he should have resigned, he should have acted differently, he should have apologized. 20 years too late. It's just a testament to the fact that the Clintons are no longer politically helpful to Democrats.
Much bigger than President Clinton. Much bigger than President Clinton.
We'll have you come back and talk about that issue, because this issue is not going away. Jammu and Derek, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, our new ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell, under fire for allegedly saying in an interview that he wants to empower European anti-establishment politicians. The reaction from European socialists and much more in Where in the World. That's next. Time now for Where in the World. U.S. Ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell, facing backlash after reportedly saying he wants to empower anti-establishment conservatives to rise up against elites. That's riled up the Germans, who want Grinnell to clarify his comments ahead of some official meetings on Thursday. While few disagree the official death toll from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico is too low, the Washington Post is urging extreme caution when it comes to the reporting from Harvard, which puts the death toll as high as 4,645 people. The Post points out the media is jumping on the headline number and ignoring numerous warnings within the study itself that the actual number is probably far lower. And the survey itself has potentially a huge margin of error. Saudi Arabia granting driver's licenses to 10 women today as the nation readies the removal of its ban on female drivers at the end of this month. The women offered those licenses previously held licenses from other countries. Well, our Midnight Hero is up next. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.